Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network, and joining me to talk Rockets' potential offseason big-name trade targets, not named Kevin Durant or Giannis, is Rockets analyst and co-host of the NBA Draft podcast, Upside Swings, Cooper Klein, along with new friend of HST, Rockets analyst Rooney Kaspar. And hey, Rooney, since we haven't met you yet, what's your Rockets origin story and where are you from? You know, how long have you followed the Rockets now?
Hey, Robert, thanks for having me. I am from Brazil. I started following hardcore the Rockets like in 2022-2023 season, like the Denver championship, because I was trying to find a team because like here in Brazil, it's like we don't have that big of a community in basketball. It's kind of growing. But I tried to play when I was younger. I was like so bad, but I find it so fun. In the pandemic, like ending the pandemic, I started to watch, but I didn't have a team. So I started talking with my friends, talking with the community, and I found the Rockets community like the best one for embracing us. So I got like in the middle of the rebuild, and I'm keeping with you guys like forever.
That sounds fantastic. And I love to hear people around the world, other countries, not just Turkey and China, loving the Rockets for obvious reasons. But guys, you know, we've already hit on Giannis and Kevin Durant in previous shows. Everybody's put their 2 cents, I think, around the Rockets community and nationally on those two. But what about the other offseason options? Because I was thinking it can't be the only options out there. And I figured it's worth exploring maybe a few names nobody's suspecting. Last week I brought up Derek White because Boston's in a financial bind. A couple national guys brought up a Jaylen Brown Van Vliet swap because it allows the Celtics to totally escape their full luxury tax mess that they're in right now. Let's say they get one rotation player out of it, like Jabari, for example, in that Jaylen Van Vliet swap, the Suns draft picks and that Nets pick swap. So the premium draft picks, you get Jaylen Brown, who's locked into a full 4-year max deal. So the Rockets then insert an all-star and finals MVP without losing Şengün, Amen, Jaylen, or Tari in a move like that. And maybe the Rockets can even re-sign Van Vliet somehow after they let him go. But let me ask you, Cooper, are you interested in that?
If you can't find a way to make it a Jalen Green for Jaylen Brown swap, I'm not super interested in it. I think Fred Van Vliet brings something, as much as, you know, it's really easy to sit here and be like, well, you know, Fred is really annoying. He sucks at layups. He makes basic reads out of the pick and roll. It's really hard to replicate what he does.
But I'm saying like you could potentially bring, because what the move does is give them that $40+ million that they can just cut. It's a matching deal for Jaylen. And, you know, you could possibly bring Van Vliet back, you know, if you can make it work. I mean, I don't know if the full mid-level would bring him back, but that's something that you could do. Or there might be a way to figure it out in some way where you can offload some of the other Rockets players.
Yeah. So I am unsure of whether we can actually bring Fred back after that. I'm pretty sure there's rules against re-signing guys after you trade them. But I do also think that just Jaylen Brown is not the best kind of fit for what we'd like to do on either end of the floor for how much money he's making. Yes, you maintain the salary slot. He's an easy shoo-in for an all-star position. Another limited ball handler on this team would make me want to throw up. Like a guy who cannot handle the kind of pressure, who really thrives in that super hyper-spaced Celtics offense. And I don't know, you know, where they don't pass the ball as much, or when they do, it's pretty simple drive-in kicks. He has all the space in the world to work in, you know, in an offense that also involves Amen and Şengün and a lot of other guys who aren't the world's best shooters. I really question what his impact could look like. I think his two-way impact is also a little overstated. Not, you know, a $300 million defensive player, especially at this point in his career. He's only like a 36% career three-point shooter. Part of that's the difficulty of attempts. I'm all for getting star power. And, you know, if this, like I said, if this was replacing Jalen Green with Jaylen Brown, maybe. But if you're going to spend all your capital on getting a star, which it would take for Jaylen Brown is going to cost a superstar level package because he is a superstar level player. In the right system, he is super valuable. I just don't want to spend that on a guy who's not a 1A star or a perfect fit with the system, like someone like a Devin Booker is, who's a lower tier star, maybe even a lower tier star than Jaylen Brown, depending on your thoughts, but is a perfect fit with what we want to do, a perfect fit with the type of offense we run, the type of defense we use. And I just worry that bringing in a guy who compounds all of your deficiencies as a star is not really the best way to move forward.
Before Rooney, you chime in, I just want to point out, just because you're not making Jaylen a part of this trade, Jalen Green, that doesn't mean you can't then trade Jalen Green after you trade Jaylen Brown. The question is Jaylen Brown worth the draft picks, worth Jabari Smith, worth bringing in on that value of a contract that's a full max, contract at this point. So you can make it Jaylen Brown, Şengün, and Amen be the three main guys going forward. Rooney, what do you think?
I understand the allure of Jaylen Brown because he's like a finals MVP, a guy that plays under Doka. I gotta have a big brand name. But my problem with him is he's like Cooper said, he's like overlapping weaknesses. If we compare him to Jalen Green shot chart, he's a worse above the big 3-point shooter than Jalen, and that is probably will be his diet if he's not gonna get like a lot of corner 3 points. So this is alarming, and he's a far better like mid-range shooter. But I don't think I want to get a Jaylen Brown to shoot mid-ranges because he's not like Devin Booker. He's not like at Kevin Durant level. He's like a 45 to 43% 3-point shooter, even like between short and long mid ranges. But his rim finishing is not that spectacular. He's like just 3% better than Jaylen, and Jaylen is not like elite on this. So I don't think I would want to have a guy that has such a bad shot diet because his percentage of threes and to layups attempts is like to rim finishes is like 59%. Jaylen is 73. So Jaylen has a better shot diet and still is inefficient. Like, so we will add a guy that I don't think he could like turn it down, and he wouldn't alleviate any ball handling duties when we like ship Fred out, So it's really hard to pair him with our stars.
It sounds like you guys just don't think he's the number one guy, which the Rockets need right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be my thing, is that he works perfectly as this number 2 option for the Celtics because they have a Tatum and they have a really good system of all guys who can take over on any given night. Drew Holiday is like their 4th or 5th option, and he's a multi-time all-star, very solid offensive player. And some nights when Jaylen Brown doesn't have it, there's other guys who can take over that. And here, if he doesn't have it, we don't have other perimeter scoring options. We need guys on the perimeter who can just carry a way heavier load than he's been asked to carry at any point in his career.
And about his defensive upside, I know that in the finals he was phenomenal. But besides that, Jason Tatum always get the hardest matchup. And for me, he's like one of the 3 or 5 best wing defenders in the league. So when you are getting a guy that isn't getting the hardest matchups because he doesn't get the guards normally, like sometimes he got the Luka on the finals, but most of the time he gets like the 3rd or the 4th best defender. He's overrated in that regard. And the advanced analytics didn't like this season and other seasons of his defensive metrics. Like it was like +0, +0.5 EPM, not that much, not that good.
All right, next up, we know the Rockets need a hero. So how about a long shot and getting a hero? How about 25-year-old all-star sharpshooter Tyler Herro, 38% from 3 for his career, 47% overall as far as his field goal percentage, 24 points per game this year with 5.5 assists. Although we have the shaky defense, he makes $31 and $33 million the next 2 seasons. Maybe, just maybe, you swap him for Jaylen and convince Pat Riley that Heat culture, and I'm throwing up my quotation marks, my air quotes, fixes Jaylen. I would be willing to throw in one of the value first-round picks and maybe even swap this Rockets 10th pick for the Heat 20th pick. So you still got a first-round pick in this year's draft just a little bit later. As a sweetener, what do you think, gentlemen?
I love Tyler Herro because he's like a perfect fit. The thing with Tyler Herro is he has the same contract as Jalen Green, but he outproduces him by a lot. He's a far and away better offensive player. And the thing that Tyler Herro does that we don't see with Jalen that much, besides like the 2-point efficiency, is he's a far and away better passer. Jalen has gotten a leap in that, but his drive assist percentage is like double. Tyler Herro is double. So he does the like the shape as, every time, and he's so good at it. Besides that, he's a far and away better shooter. Like at 3-point volume, like his 3-point pull-up was 35%. Jaylen was 31. So, he's like a 50%, 70% of the league area, and Jaylen is like the 50-50. He has all the heat scoring gravity. And besides that, he's like if I'm not mistaken, like 17% better as a mid-range shooter in the short mid-range area, and 10% in the long mid-range area. So if we give him the star volume, he'll produce. The usage we are giving to Jaylen, we are getting so much negative value. And in true shooting added, which is a statistics like combine true shooting percentage with volume, so we can have like how much points the guy added. Tyler Herro is the 8th best guard in the model. Like Jaylen is the 143rd. So it's like he's such a far and away better scorer.
Yeah, and Cooper, I'll just throw in this. He's not a number one guy. You're not trading for a number one guy. I'm just wanting a Jalen Green upgrade with this move. Plus, his defense is not Jalen Green defense, but at some point, I keep making this point, Udoka is going to have to give up a little bit of defense, maybe to get an offensive guy. Typically, most teams don't have elite defenders at all 5 positions, or, you have one guy that's not really good because he's got to have the scoring load. We have guys around him that you can put that can take up the defensive slack. And he's just a perimeter guy. If he's your smallest guard, say, on the floor, because Amen's in the backcourt with him, that's not terrible.
Yeah, and we definitely have the defensive infrastructure to kind of insulate him if it is, necessary. But I will push back a little bit because I do worry to the degree that the Cavs attacked him in the playoffs and even like came out and were joking about how bad of a defender he was in the pick and roll. Some of that is, the Heat were very obviously going nowhere. The Cavs were very obviously a better team. Some of that can be effort. As much as they're completely different players and Herro's a far better scorer, we're seeing guys on this team who cannot defend to an adequate level just not get playing time, just not get usage. In Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd as a rookie. As much as it's like Ime has to get over it at some point, how much of the stubbornness is going to cause friction? How much of Amen throwing him on the ground and could cause some friction there. I just worry. The star 2 guard is a really hard spot to build around, and with the kind of offense that we currently run, I do think that Herro would be a really interesting fit. I think he's a simple player. He can plug in very well next to Amen, next to Şengün on the offensive end. He makes sense. He carries a higher offensive burden. He makes a lot more passes out of the pick and roll and out of his drives, which is something that me and you, Robert, have been desperately begging for from our star players for the last few years. That maybe that makes it all worth it. If the value's low enough, I'm all for just replacing Jaylen with an above average player or an all-star level player and just seeing how that works. But there are definite question marks that would make me hesitant to overpay to any degree or pay even market value for a guy who is, good. He's obviously very good, but like the Heat made a finals run without him fully a few years back. And stuff like that is very obviously small sample size and not something to be fully indexed for. But there's a lot of question marks and not something that I would be like fully on board with doing. But I'd be in on it.
Yeah, and really the goal here is you kind of give up perfection a little bit if you're not getting Giannis or Kevin Durant, because those are guys that you give the ball at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, and what they're going to be able to do. And Tyler Herro has some of that in him. Jaylen Brown has some of them, but you guys know the flaws, and you mentioned those. And for our listeners, I just want to hear your Rockets takes. Let me know in the YouTube comments. For Texans fans, I just had Sports Radio 610 Sean Vajani on last week on all the latest Texans. I've also had draft experts and insiders breaking down the Texans draft, and I'm going to put those links at the end of the YouTube video just in case any of you guys missed it. You can support us and get updates on every show that drops by subscribing on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up and listen while you're out and about with your favorite podcast app. All right, guys, next guy up. Could I talk you into a 23-year-old one-time all-star guard named LaMelo Ball? Kind of hold your nose at some of LaMelo's stuff, but he's a taller, better passing Jalen Green. You got to point that out. And this is the Jalen before Udoka got his defensive grips on Jalen. And right now, when you look at LaMelo, he's sort of a clone of early Jalen with the defensive issues and sort of not serious about winning basketball guy at the head of your snake. But can you at least consider him, Cooper?
I really worry about his, he plays for Charlotte. So there's not really any winning, basketball in his soul. But LaMelo is one of the most talented players in the league. At the end of the day, this is a guy who's one of the best playmakers in the league. He somehow leverages a pretty poor rim finishing and ability to get to the rim and just elite shooting into pretty great playmaking. He would, him and Amen in transition would be just free offense again and again and again. This is a guy who, at his size at 6'7", he's a plus athlete. I think if you can even just get something out of him defensively, which I think Ime could, he's not like a Tyler Herro where he's a minus lateral mover with a minus wingspan. He's only 6'4", 6'5". This guy who's legit 6'7", legit instincts off the ball. He doesn't play that winning brand of defense where he's making good rotations. He over gambles, shoots passing lanes too much. But I do think that there is a good defender in there. Part of that is that he's not somehow a bad defender on the Heat, which is almost a death knell to me in terms of, for Herro, if you're playing for the Heat and you're a bad defender, maybe you're just a bad defender. With LaMelo, I can at least kind of wave it off. I do think that there's worries about LaMelo in the playoffs. What does his half-court ball handling, his half-court offensive generation look like? This is a guy who is, one of the most prolific three-point shooters of our generation. Just insane touch. Generational touch. The big worry, though, is other than the stuff I've already brought up, is the injury concerns. I would buy in if this was a guy who could reliably play 60 games a year and you knew what you were getting and he was going to stick around and just actually play in the playoffs. But this is a guy who's injured year in, year out with some new crazy thing every year. And that is very, very alarming. So I wouldn't really want to give up the farm that would be required for him if we're completely unsure about his health, like I think we are at the moment.
I'm on the same ground because LaMelo, he has the shot chart is really similar to Jalen's, especially the rim assist percentage. So his team cripples him as much as us crippling Jalen because he has a 23% rim assist percentage, but his finishing is way worse than Jalen. So we will be paying for a guy that is a primary ball handler, and I think one of the best in the league, but he hasn't proven to play in a winning environment, so it will be such a gamble. And besides that, the injury stuff is so strange because he hasn't had a full season in the league, basically. I love the idea of LaMelo because having a tall ball handler is the dream for every team. We will have the biggest guard lineup with Amen and LaMelo. And I think he could play really well off ball based on his pre-NBA tape. But it will be a long shot because it's such a dice roll.
Yeah, he's just got too many red flags, like you guys said. And the big thing is the Rockets are in a position right now where they don't have to take that shot. If you're Brooklyn or somebody that, is willing to take a shot because you don't have anything going on, I can see maybe taking a shot on LaMelo. But, with the injuries, you mentioned that. I mean, that's to me number one. And then just the other stuff of him, is he really going to start playing real basketball? You figure maybe he's going to mature and that stuff is going to leave. But, we keep saying the same stuff about Jalen and it just hasn't happened. So next guy up. This one doesn't have major sex appeal for some Rockets fans, but Rooney brought up a name that got me thinking. Sacramento has a new GM, so Zach Lavine's got to be on the table. From the way it sounded, nobody except the Kings wanted him last year, even though his shooting is Steph Curry-esque. Lavine shot 44.6% from three on both the Kings and Bulls. This year, 51.1% field goal percentage overall for his career, 39% from three. So, this is a sharpshooter. Yes, his defense sucks. He doesn't fill up rebounds or assists. He's sort of similar to Jalen in that way, but he's light years better at shooting than Jalen. So he's definitely an upgrade there. You hope that Udoka's defensive queer eye for the offensive guy can make over that defense. It's just 2 years left on a contract at $47 and $49 million. Does maybe a Jaylen and Jock Landale for Lavine and a draft pick sound stupid? I'm going to start with Rooney because this is your guy that you brought up to me.
Yeah, I think his allure is because getting a star shot maker. He's a star shot maker. He's what we projected Jaylen to be. He's such an absurd shooter, but nobody talks about him because he's like in so terrible situation. And his defense is overblown because when I went back and watched like that year when Caruso went to the Bulls first time, they were pretty competitive, but when Lonzo went out, they kind of gave up and his defense like went down. And here in Sacramento, his defense is terrible because they don't have any wing defenders. So Sabonis is that everyone on there has a terrible defense. So I think he's more systematic. But about his shot making, he's one of the best pull-up shooters in the game. When I was doing my research, it's hard to find like pull-up shooting specific if you don't have synergy. So I went like into another site to find like kinda. And I don't think this is accurate because he didn't probably take 4 pull-up attempts per game. But it's more like the idea. He had a great volume and he was the best pull-up percentage shooter above like 2.5 that I found. 2.5 attempts per game. So he was like at 43%. This is absurd. This is like a Steph Curry prime day numbers. I think his volume was way lower than that guy's, but it's kind of the idea. And his mid-range shooting is stellar. He's 13 points percent better than Jaylen in short mid-ranges. And he's a better finisher at the basket. He's a better long mid-range shooter. And his shot diet is really, really, really good. His rim to three frequency is basically above Jaylen, so he don't take bad shots. So his diet is kind of easy-esque, like the modern way. And the thing that I love the most is after everything I said, his passing is basically what Jaylen does. So he's not a lower grade passer. We'll be switching Jaylen right now with the idea of Jaylen Green, And his contract is not that worse because he's 2 years and the second year is a player option on 50 million. Jaylen will be like 2 years on 33 million.
Yeah, the key is, I mean, you're giving him these 2 semi-max year things, but it's basically ends. You're out of it at the point where Amen gets the fun max, and you might want to start building other stuff. But he gives you some sort of stopgap when you're not paying the big money. And if the Kevin Durant thing doesn't work out, he's kind of the same stopgap type of guy. I mean, he's not Kevin Durant as far as some areas, but you're not going to be maybe paying as much, I would think, to get him. And they would be much more interested, I would say, Cooper and Jaylen than, for example, Phoenix, because what could Phoenix do with Jaylen? Because they've got Booker and Beal.
And I have one thing to add. If most people don't remember this, but Chris Middleton refused his player option to get less money. So if we can sell him into the winning environment, maybe he could come here and take out his player option so that we can get a long-term deal. And he's not that old. He's like 29, 30, if I'm not mistaken. So I love this fit for us.
I love Lavine. What he does on the floor is a great fit with what we want to do. I do worry about the injury history. I think that's why he's not a super valued player, despite the insane efficiency. I think he's a fine cog in the machine defender. I think he fits into a system pretty well. And once Caruso goes down or gets traded, once Lonzo gets injured, you start to see his production kind of drop because he's tasked with a bigger and bigger defensive workload.
But this isn't Kawhi because he's, 3 of the last 4 seasons, he's averaged over 70 games a year. He just had that 1 year in the last 4.
Yeah, but he kind of lost, it took him a while to get back to his efficiency is kind of the worry, right? Like he got injured and then he wasn't like Kevin Durant where he came back engine revving at full speed. It took him some time to rehab. So yeah, you're right. I'm not even as worried about him as I am with a guy like LaMelo, where it's like every single season he's playing 20 to 50 games or whatever. If you can get a guy like that, undervalued on the trade market, you don't give up as much. I think that he is exactly what you want Jaylen to be, but he can actually play off the ball a little better. He's a smarter cutter. He's a smarter DHO option. You've seen him play off of guys like Vucevic, like Sabonis. and play well offensively. You could run him and Amen in handoff stuff in the pick and roll. How do you guard those two with guard defenders? Then you have to stick wing defenders on them, and then you have a guard on Tari Eason or a guard switched onto Şengün. Or, we have all these guys who can punish, these teams' inability to guard Amen and Lavine and just these three he kind of fits the idea of why you would want Booker, right? Booker is great because he can come in, play off the ball, can create on the ball, but he really revolutionizes your offense just by being a gravity well in a way that we just don't have on the roster. I think you hope that's Reed Shepherd. I think that was the hope with Jalen Green, but neither of those guys are sure things. As much as I love Reed, as much as I love that 50%, 52% pre-NBA shooting sample, you got to be realistic about your own guys. So I would bring in Lavine, see what you got, really add some complexity to this offense that desperately needs it. And I think Lavine injects that just by existing. If you trade for him, you're doing it with the acknowledgement that we're not just making him ISO all game. Even though he could. In the playoffs, we could just let him ISO all game down the stretch, and he'd be really, really good at it because he's athletic. His handle is a lot tighter than Jalen's. I think that's a huge part of it for me. He can attack downhill without, losing the ball off of nothing. So and I'm fine with overpaying for a few years, because as long as it doesn't interrupt that Amen super max he's probably going to end up getting, it's nothing to me.
The two guys that I think it seems like we might agree that make the most sense for the Rockets are Herro and Zach, because those two are the ones that you can get off the Jaylen money. That third-year option with Jaylen is, one of my big issues with him to begin with, but you can get off of Jaylen for a guy that is the exact opposite as a shooter and a scorer, and for a team that could have used anybody in the playoffs this year to put the ball in the basket. Those two guys, we know when the ball goes up, there's a really good chance that it goes in with those guys. And I think that's why I'm looking at something like that. I mean, it's not perfect, and it's, you want to keep all these draft choices because, if something doesn't go right with Giannis and Kevin Durant deals, or, and even Durant is a very short-term option. I mean, that's why I'm not a big fan of it if you're giving up, these draft choices. But if you don't have to give up all of these draft choices, these are guys that kind of make sense. Plus, I think at some point you got to go, every year, these big guys might become available, but they still have to want to come to Houston. They still want to, they got to want to go out of their current situation. We still, we might find out the next 2 days that Giannis is ready to leave, but who knows? I mean, everybody's like, oh, these guys always become available. Well, yeah, but sometimes Nico makes a silent trade that nobody talks about, and you never have a shot at the guy or whatever. So that's why I just look at, hey, you don't want to hold the capital forever, because these draft capital, it's like bananas. They rot pretty quickly once you take them off the shelf, and that's the thing with draft picks.
One thing that isn't being talked about enough is this is our last window to add a superstar player, to have a big three, aka big three, because this is the window we have with Şengün in his contract slot and with Amen in his rookie deal. Besides this, we won't have the money and we won't have the assets to have a superstar player. So this is the last shot we have at that. If we want to keep growing organically, we can perfectly, but we won't have like 3 max players receiving less money, So that's the allure of getting those guys this year.
If you're going to commit to the max guy, I think you can have like the rookie max guys, and because Şengün is such a value, if Şengün's not going out in something like that, Şengün is below the fun max. So at this point, Şengün, Amen, and you can have a full max guy, but at some point you got to decide, okay, which direction are we going? None of us want to go the Jaylen full max direction in 2 or 3 years. So it's like, where are you going from here, and how do you build it out? I mean, that's something that at some point down the road, OKC's got to worry about. Their big benefit is they got guys playing at almost a fun max level, with Chet and Jaylen, that the Rockets just don't have, except one guy like that, and Amen. So it gives them a little bit more flexibility than I think the Rockets do, right, Coop?
Yeah, and I do think that we could wait till the trade deadline. If Fred decides to come back, he would be an expiring basically, supermax slot. You still have guys like Jabari on their rookie contracts who would be owed an extension. They would hit restricted free agency. But you do have this summer leading up to the trade deadline to make a deal like this. It's a lot harder to get something like this done in midseason. You have to match players, have to cut guys to make sure that the roster numbers work in a way that you don't have to in the offseason. There's just so much more flexibility, especially before the draft, to make trades like this happen. Even, before you start signing your rookie drafted players, there's a ton of flexibility, but it's a lot easier to get something like this done before the draft. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Stone, who is historically, he will wait till the last minute. He will play the market. He is going to see what everybody will offer. And then as soon as he knows what his very best offer is, that's what he's going to go with. He's done that every single year, every single trade he's made. He has waited it out. He's made us sit on the hot coals in a very annoying way, but he's very thorough. So I wouldn't be surprised if this takes a lot longer than we think it would, even though the potential flexibility would make something like this easier to do sooner rather than later.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about keeping Fred is like you're going to be going way over the tax. You're going into the apron by keeping Fred because the Jaylen contract kicks in this year, the Şengün, both extensions kick in this year. You're also really wanting to re-sign Steven Adams, and I don't think Steven Adams is going to take less money than he took last time. He's going to want more money than he got from his last contract. So, that all plays a big part of the equation. Any last thoughts, Rooney, on any of the stuff that we've talked about?
No, I think we passed a great point, and the idea of what we would be if Jaylen was who we want him to be. That's why we brought up Lavine, we brought up Herro, we brought like KD. Even though KD is not the same idea as Jaylen, but he's a go-to shooter. So I think this is what we are missing from being like a 60, 65 win team and competing with the likes of OKC.
Yeah, I also think we're offensive coordinator away from being like a 60 or 65 win team. Cooper's at Ali_oop_Coop on X, as you guys know. Get all your NBA draft content on his Upside Swings podcast. And Coop, I got to mention this with all the tanking and the NBA Final Four set, because I don't think people might have put this together yet. Here are the best players on the Thunder, T-Wolves, Knicks, and Pacers. Jalen Brunson was chosen in the second round. Halliburton and Jalen Williams were the 12th picks. MVP candidate SGA, the 11th pick. Julius Randle, the 7th. Yes, Ant and Cat are number 1 overall picks, but Cooper, chances are somebody's going to find a gem outside the top 4 in this draft. I mean, just look at it. I mean, look where we are right now in the NBA. These guys are not high draft choices. And there's another guy people might remember named Jokic that was a second-round pick.
Especially in a class like this, I think that the top is a lot of fool's gold. We're seeing guys like Yegor Demin, really jumping after these combine scrimmages and not even scrimmages, just combine drills. Yeah, it happens every year, and I think that it's just a really flawed process from a lot of people who just don't fully understand, and that's why these teams that are just keep sticking at the bottom over and over and over again. It's a process thing. It's not because that they're just morally cursed or evil or whatever. It's because they have a poor process. And I'm hoping that, we stick at 10, we make a pick of a guy who has a great process, a guy like Con Knipple, even a guy like Derek Queen, who I think could be a future star in this league. I think there's a lot of really good bets at really good players outside of the top 5 to 7 in this year's class.
You never know, because none of the top 3 MVP candidates were picked higher than the Rockets' current pick in the draft. Joker picked in the second round. Like I said, Giannis was 15th, 5 spots below where the Rockets are picking right now. Even Steph Curry was picked at 7. Donovan Mitchell at number 13. So like, this is the area where sometimes you find the gems, a lot of times that happens, and the number 1 picks, we know they can be total bust at times. You never know what's going to happen there either. So go check out Upside Swings. He's going to be doing a lot of research into this stuff. They'll keep talking about this going up to draft day. And then Rooney's at Rooney Wondering. It's not up on the screen, but it's Rooney Wondering, not the wondering like you're out in the desert. I guess it's more like he's thinking about stuff, I think, if my correct dictionary definition of that is. But you can, right, Rooney, you can connect with him over there, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me, Robert. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for doing this, guys. Appreciate the time. And we're going to do one in the future on the more role player guys that the Rockets could target in this offseason. So keep an eye out for that one coming up as well. Take care, everybody.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.